male dragonfly. We've got to do a bit of dragonfly sex after all. And this could be the female one, because we haven't got a brown pipe cleaner. But basically, because there's competition for mates, once a male dragonfly has got a female dragonfly, he doesn't want to lose it to another male. He may have invested a lot of energy getting a territory or doing the display fights. You know, and that's costly. Put a lot of energy into that. Remember, he's only got a short life, so he doesn't want to waste an opportunity. So once he's courted and got a female's attention, and she's prepared to mate with him, he wants to hang on to her. And male dragonflies have what we call claspers, which has been carefully crafted by this young man. and the male dragonfly, or damselfly, will use these claspers to clasp onto a female. Now they do it in various ways, which I'm not entirely sure I want to... You know, I want seen on YouTube later. Why not? The male dragonflies will sometimes hang onto the heads of the females like this, and he will use, well, not the head, but behind the head, and they'll use the claspers like this, and you'll get the two insects flying what we call in tandem. And the benefit of this is that this means that the female is not available for any other males. He's got her all to himself. And so whilst you might imagine, you know, tying yourself to a female and trying to fly, well, some Tory MPs I think have probably tried that. And you might have read about it in the news of the world. But normally that's pretty tough. But the dragonflies seem to do it with remarkable alacrity. You know, they don't seem to be handicapped and they fly perfectly well. I always think it must make them slightly more vulnerable to predation because they can't possibly fly as fast. But they can. And sometimes the male, and particularly the damselfly species, when they've mated, the male will rest on the surface, and then the female will go down underneath the surface of the water, and the male will still be attached. He won't let go. And very possessive, these insects at this stage. And so that's one thing that can happen. And the other thing is, this is going to be more difficult to assemble. But anyway, sometimes they can attach themselves in another way. Oh God, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'll tell you what, Valerie Singleton never did this on Blue People. I've got my dragonflies in a complete knot. Anyway, there you are. In another way, so they actually form a loop. And it's all about the males hanging on to the females whilst they're in the process of egg laying, and it prevents another male from getting in, and therefore it guarantees, of course, that this male gets its genes, or half of its genes, quarter of its genes, into the next population. And that's another thing that's quite diagnostic. So you've separated them. I would do that as well. Disgusting. and when you see them flying, again, that's another means of being able to identify the species. So, and that pretty much completes the process. The females then laying her eggs. As I think before I explained, sometimes they drop them, sometimes they insert them in vegetation. They've got to, again, to avoid competition, and because of the way the larvae develop, they choose a different means of releasing those eggs. And then the larvae go. Thanks, woodpecker. And at least he thinks it's funny. And they start their growth process. When they're on the wing, as I say, they can travel quite large distances. Some of these species are migratory. We've even had dragonflies arrive in this country, which are migrant species in North America. And in the autumn, when we get this series of depressions that goes across the North Atlantic, like some of the birds that are blown across here more frequently, these insects get blown across too. So they're capable of travelling large distances. There we are, woodpecker.
There are flies in the Atlantic then?
Well, they don't feed when they're blowing over. I don't think they really want it. It's just like an unplanned holiday. They get up and they'll be planning on migrating perhaps down the east coast of America, and all of a sudden they get hit by a big gust of wind up the backside, and they wake up in Cornwall. I have to say, it's probably a pleasure so for them, and it's so quaint down there. So yeah, but we have species in this country as well which regularly visit the UK, which are continental species. And in fact, now I have to say, and a lady was asking me earlier, what about global warming? What about climate change? Well, this is exciting in some ways, because dragonflies, because they lay lots of eggs, and they reproduce therefore quickly, and because they're such strong flyers, they are one of the key species that we will see responding to changes in our climate.